You know, IFA has identified over the last several years a special focus on the next generation. Obviously a topic of keen interest to you because so many youth are becoming part of our prison system. You don't have to look far to know the kind of pressures that our young people are under today. You're a parent and a grandparent, and what advice can you give to those of us who care deeply about our youth, the next generation, to help them make it in this very troubled world that they're growing up in?
We've got to take them by the hand and teach them ourselves, because they're not going to learn it anyplace else. Parents and grandparents have a solemn, sacred responsibility to teach their kids, teach them the Bible verses, of course, teach them about Jesus, teach them the basics, teach them discipleship, teach them to think Christianly, to use their minds. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, the Apostle Paul said. Renew your mind to put biblical premises, anchor them in your mind, and then when you look what goes on in the world, judge what goes on according to those biblical premises. I start every single day with the Bible and the New York Times. One I believe every word of, one I'm very skeptical about. But at least I can compare what the cultural elite in America are saying in the world with what the Bible says. And that informs me for the day. I usually end up writing a breakpoint commentary or doing a chapter for a book, or because I can always see how foolish so many of the things going on in the world are. But you need that kind of a filter. The evidence is overwhelming that over half of the kids who come out of good Christian homes and churches and youth groups lose their faith in college. So I'm watching the destruction of a generation on two fronts. I'm watching the poverty-stricken kids in the inner cities, minority kids largely coming out and ending up right in prison, following their father's footsteps. It's a family business. And I'm watching the middle-class kids go off to college and lose their faith. We need to do a much better job. It isn't enough just to get kids into youth groups in churches. They do their happy clappies and they get their games. You gotta somehow start teaching them to think. And this is one of the things you asked me at the beginning of the interview, how I'm spending my time differently. One of the things we're doing is developing a lot of curriculum for young people, video curriculum and course guides and things we can give to church youth pastors. We have got to get these kids thinking Christianly early.
And if you're sitting there with your son or your daughter or a mature grandchild, if you could just impart some pearls of wisdom for living that tie back into this matter of worldview, where would that focus be?
First question I would discuss with them is the first question I'd discuss with anybody I'm starting to teach. Number one is their truth. Is truth knowable? Is there such a thing as moral truth? Are there any absolutes? We have been bathed in a culture of relativism, which says, you have your truth, I have my truth, I'm not going to impose mine on you. And we got lots of politicians in America who won't even impose their own truth on themselves. I mean, it's just, it's chaos. And no society can survive with that. No society ever has survived that way. Will and Ariel Durant wrote The History of Western Civilization. They said there's been no case in history where a civilization has been able to survive without moral truth, and no case where that moral truth has not been informed by religious beliefs. So we're embarked on a very novel experiment in America, and in the West, which is that there is no truth, and it's not knowable. That's pure nonsense. First thing I would teach people is there is truth and it is knowable.